Mel met Jason at a mutual friend's party during their final year of college. He had an easy charm, the kind that made everyone in the room lean in just a bit. At first, she thought he was too smooth, too perfect with his words, but his consistency over time wore her skepticism down. They began dating, slowly at first, but steadily. Jason supported her career dreams, even helped her find her first interior design job after graduation. When he proposed 2 years later, she didn't hesitate. They had built something strong, so she believed. The first few years of marriage were seamless. They worked well together, filled in each other's gaps. Jason handled spontaneity. Mel brought structure. They traveled often, cooked together, made time for quiet rituals. Saturday pancakes, Sunday night movies, little notes in lunchboxes. It wasn't grand romance, but it was grounded and real. Mel felt secure. She had no reason to doubt him. Gradually, things shifted. At first it was small. Jason started coming home late without explanation, brushing it off with vague talk about deadlines. Then he began guarding his phone, once left out in the open. Now it was always in his pocket or face down. Mel noticed but didn't jump to conclusions. Everyone gets busy. Maybe he was just tired, but the warmth was missing. Their conversations grew shallow. Intimacy faded, not suddenly, but steadily, like someone slowly turning down a dimmer switch. She brought it up once, gently, and he brushed it off, saying she was overthinking everything. She wanted to believe that. Around that time, Riley started coming around more often. Riley had been her friend since before Jason. Fun, spontaneous. The kind of woman who always had stories and laughter to spare. Mel trusted her. When Mel confided in her about the tension in her marriage, Riley was sympathetic, always validating her feelings. Men go through these phases, she'd say. They get distant, and then they bounce back. It sounded reasonable. Riley was supportive, always around when Jason was, and single quotes to. One night, Mel was folding laundry when Jason's phone buzzed. She wasn't snooping. The notification lit up and caught her eye unintentionally. A message preview. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Her heart skipped. The name was saved under a random male contact, but the tone wasn't casual. She stared at the message for minutes, hoping she misread. She didn't ask Jason about it. There was no point. He would deny it. She asked Riley instead, needing someone to steady her thoughts. Riley dismissed it as a miscommunication, said Jason probably had work plans or someone was being playful. She brushed it off so confidently that Mel started questioning her own reaction. But the seed of doubt had been planted. It grew in silence. Mel began noticing how often Riley mentioned Jason in passing, his work schedule, the project he was on, small details he hadn't told Mel. She ignored it at first, until Riley casually referenced a dinner Jason had supposedly skipped, a dinner Mel hadn't known about. Mel laughed it off then, but later that night, she lay awake replaying the conversation. Determined not to spiral, she tried redirecting her energy. She suggested a weekend trip, just the two of them, but Jason said work was too demanding. He promised they'd do it later. Later never came. His distance became more pronounced. Mel reached out to her sister Ella, who suggested she stop ignoring the signs. Don't gaslight yourself, Ella said quietly. You're not imagining this. Mel decided to surprise Jason at work. She packed his favorite lunch, something she hadn't done in a while, and drove across town. His assistant looked confused. He left about an hour ago. Said he had a personal appointment. Mel asked if he mentioned with who. The assistant shrugged and said, I think he said Riley. Mel smiled tightly and walked away. Her hands shook as she held the lunch bag. She sat in her car for nearly 30 minutes, unable to drive. Her mind ran in loops. Had Riley lied? Had Jason? Were they both hiding something, or was she again overreacting? That night, Jason walked in like nothing had happened. She asked how work went. He said it was boring. Said he hadn't left the office all day. She said nothing. Not because she didn't want to scream, but because she knew screaming wouldn't give her answers. She was no longer looking for proof. She was waiting for a crack. One moment of carelessness from either of them. Riley came by the next day. She brought wine, chocolates, talked about a new show Mel should watch. Too cheerful, too rehearsed. Mel smiled and played along, but something in her chest had hardened. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It was intuition sharpening itself. She began noticing more. Jason's phone never left his hand. Rayleigh stopped looking her in the eye. Ella's check-ins became daily. Everything around her was shifting, tilting, exposing truths she wasn't ready to admit. But denial was no longer a safe place. It was becoming exhausting. The pieces weren't falling into place. They were cracking apart. And Mel knew it was. Only a matter of time before the truth would no longer be avoidable. Mel started keeping her distance, not emotionally cold, but observant. She watched and listened. The shift wasn't just in Jason anymore. Riley's energy had changed too. There were moments when she knew something was off. Like when Riley mentioned Jason's business trip dates Mel hadn't told her. Or when Riley made an offhand joke about Jason's favorite cologne, a new one Mel hadn't noticed him wearing. Little fragments that meant nothing alone. But together, they scratched at the edges of Mel's trust. One evening, while Jason was in the shower, his tablet lit up. A backup notification popped up, photos syncing. Mel wasn't trying to spy, but curiosity overpowered restraint. She opened the folder. Buried between vacation albums and work screenshots was a photo that froze her breath. Riley in a red dress, laughing in a hotel lobby. Jason beside her. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago, on the night he claimed he had dinner with a client. No explanation, no context. Just Riley, Jason, and a truth that hit harder than any spoken confession. Mel closed the app and sat silently. For a long time, she didn't confront him. She didn't cry. Instead, something inside her clicked. She needed more. One image wasn't enough. Jason was good with words. He could manipulate a single photo into something meaningless. She needed undeniable evidence. Over the next week, Mel watched him closely. When Jason said he had to visit his mother on Saturday, Mel didn't argue. She waited until he left, then quietly drove across town to Riley's apartment. She parked 2 blocks away and waited. 30 minutes passed. Then she saw it, Jason's car pulling up to the curb. Riley came out in a sweatshirt and leggings, hair tied back, holding the door open with a casual ease that made Mel's stomach knot. They went inside. Lights turned on. Curtains remained open, just long enough for Mel to see them sit side by side on the couch, close, too familiar. She sat in her car, heart pounding, knuckles white against the steering wheel. She didn't cry, she didn't rage, just silence, heavy and suffocating. After an hour, she drove away numb. The betrayal wasn't a shock anymore. It was a confirmation. That night, Jason returned home, dropped his keys on the Mel didn't wait for an apology that could fix anything. The next morning, she woke early, packed a single bag, and left the house without a word. She wasn't interested in closure from Jason or explanations from Riley. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, just drove until the city felt distant and the silence felt safe. She stayed with Ella for a while, not to cry but to breathe. No one asked questions. She didn't volunteer details. Her pain wasn't for public display, it was private, processed in small pieces when no one was watching. Jason sent messages the first few days. Long paragraphs, some angry, others apologetic. She read them once and never replied. He wanted forgiveness without accountability. He called it a mistake, but she now understood that betrayal rarely happened by accident. Riley reached out too. A 3-minute voice note, crying, saying she'd been lonely, that she never meant to steal anything. Mel didn't respond. The silence was her answer. The people around them began to notice. Some friends drifted. Others asked uncomfortable questions. Rayleigh's version of the story painted her as misunderstood, swept up in something she couldn't control, but sympathy ran thin when the full truth emerged. The charm Riley used to disarm people lost its power. Her circle shrank, and the attention she once thrived on turned cold. Meanwhile, Mel began rebuilding. Not with dramatic gestures, but in steady, private ways. She returned to therapy. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since the early days of marriage. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a part of herself. She journaled daily, not about Jason or Riley, but about who she was before them and who she was becoming without them. Her writing shifted over time from confusion to clarity, from pain to purpose. She learned that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about seeing the truth and not letting it define her. The betrayal didn't break her, it revealed her strength. She joined a support group, not to dwell on heartbreak, but to connect with others who understood the quiet devastation of infidelity. They shared their stories, raw and real, and in that space, Mel found something rare: unfiltered solidarity. Months passed. She created routines that were hers alone. Morning walks, late-night tea, new playlists. She bought new bedsheets, rearranged furniture, changed her phone number. Not out of spite, but to draw a line between before and after. Every change, no matter how small, was a declaration. She wasn't going back. She thought of Jason less frequently. When she did, it was with detachment. Not bitterness, not longing, just distance. The man she loved was a memory. The man who betrayed her was someone else entirely. The gap between them was no longer painful. It was necessary. One afternoon, while running errands, she saw him, standing outside a cafe, phone in hand, looking lost in thought. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a hesitant smile. She didn't return it. Just kept walking. That moment could have reopened wounds, but it didn't. Instead, it sealed something shut. She owed him nothing. Not even acknowledgement. She never saw Riley again. Rumors swirled: another falling out, a job lost, another friendship ruined. Mel didn't care. She had stopped keeping track. The chapter had closed, and she refused to reread it. Instead, she poured her energy into herself. She started her own design studio, a dream she'd delayed for years. Clients came in steadily. Her work flourished. Her confidence returned. She found herself laughing again, genuinely. Not forced, not polite, real laughter. The kind that surprised her at first. The kind that reminded her what joy felt like. In quiet moments, she'd sit on her balcony, coffee in hand, and reflect, not with regret, but with gratitude for how far she'd come. She had been betrayed, yes, but she had also survived. Reclaimed her peace, rebuilt her identity. She was no longer someone's wife or someone's second choice. She was herself. Whole, grounded, free. People often asked her if she ever got closure. She would smile, not because she had the answer they wanted, but because she finally understood that closure isn't something you get from others. It's something you give yourself. Jason became a story she didn't tell anymore. Riley became a name that held no weight. What mattered now was the woman Mel became after everything shattered. The strength in her silence, the clarity in her solitude, the beauty in choosing herself, not as a reaction to betrayal, but as a promise to never abandon her own worth again. What happened next? Mel lived, not just existed, lived. On her own terms, in her own space, without apology. And that, more than anything, was the ending she deserved. Mel's business began to take off within 6 months of launching. The focus she once poured into her marriage now channeled into her designs, each project more personal than the last. Clients noticed. They spoke about the calm confidence she carried, the attention to detail in every space. She no longer needed validation from someone else's approval. She built it with her own hands. Every signed contract was a reminder she had value beyond relationships. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was progressing. Ella remained close, not out of obligation, but sisterhood that had deepened through everything. They had dinners together often, sometimes in silence, other times dissecting memories that no longer hurt. Mel stopped checking Jason's social media. Whatever life he was living wasn't her concern. Whether he stayed with Riley or moved on again didn't matter. Their stories had diverged. The outcome didn't shape hers anymore. One day, Mel received a formal letter from Jason. No emotions, no last-ditch effort, just logistical talk about finalizing the divorce. She scanned it, signed where needed, and mailed it back the same afternoon. There was no hesitation. She had already let go a long time ago. This was just paperwork catching up with reality. A friend who hadn't spoken to her in over a year reached out unexpectedly. She had heard about Jason and Riley, about the affair, the fallout, and how Mel handled it. "You've changed," the message said, in a good way. Mel didn't reply. Not because she was unkind, but because that chapter didn't require reopening. Growth didn't need to be witnessed to be real. She knew what she had endured. She knew what she had rebuilt. That was enough. Mel started dating again, cautiously but without fear. The first few attempts were short-lived, not because she was guarded, but because she refused to settle. If someone wasn't aligned with her peace, she didn't make space for them. It wasn't bitterness. It was self-respect. She realized she'd once accepted crumbs in the name of love. Now she wanted substance, not illusion. A few connections felt promising, but she wasn't in a rush. She was comfortable in her solitude, no longer needing someone to fill a void. She began traveling again. Not far, just weekend escapes, new cities, new views, unfamiliar streets that made her feel alive. Each trip reminded her how much of life she'd put on pause, waiting for a partner who had already checked out. She wasn't running from pain anymore. She was walking toward possibility. For the first time in years, she made choices based solely on what she wanted. No compromise. No guilt. Her apartment changed too. Walls painted in warm tones. Art she loved, not just what matched Jason's taste. A bookshelf full of authors he never read. Music filled the space, sometimes jazz, sometimes nothing but the wind through the curtains. It felt like home, not just a place she lived. She was surrounded by things that reflected who she was becoming, not who she used to be. Months later, during a small gathering, someone brought up infidelity. Casual conversation, someone else's story. Mel didn't flinch. She didn't jump to contribute, she just listened. Not with judgment, not with pain, just presence. Her past no longer hijacked the room. It stayed quiet where it belonged. She had made peace with it by refusing to carry it forward. Jason's name came up only once again. A friend mentioned he had moved out of the city. Started a new job. No word on Riley. Mel nodded politely. The information meant nothing. Her world no longer revolved around what he did or didn't do. She didn't carry resentment. Just disinterest. Night she finalized the last legal detail. She sat alone with a glass of wine. Not to celebrate an ending, but to acknowledge a beginning. No big emotions, no dramatic weight, just a quiet awareness that she had made it through something meant to break her. And she hadn't just made it. She had evolved. She never crafted a revenge narrative. Never posted cryptic quotes or aired grievances online. Her story wasn't one of vengeance, but resilience. There was strength in her silence, dignity in her detachment, power in choosing her own path without spectacle. Asterisk, years from now. If anyone were to ask her what happened, she wouldn't recount the betrayal in detail. She'd simply say, "I outgrew it." Because that's the truth. The pain didn't define her. Her response did. Her growth did. Her peace did. Asterisk, what happened next wasn't about Jason or Riley. It wasn't about what they lost or what she overcame. It was about what she reclaimed herself. And that story, unlike the one that broke her, was entirely hers to write.